Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Shelter Tales. My name is Connie Galley, and with me today are Laura Simon and Deborah Galley, no relationship, of the Connecticut Wildlife Rehabilitation Association. Have come quite a long way down in the Greenwich and Seymour area. This show was originally started to help and increase awareness of shelter animals' plights, but as we've grown, this show is now to increase awareness of any animal, wild or domesticated, that needs help. They are just another nation, and there's a lot of good people out there to help them. So Laura is the board president, and Deborah is a rehabilitator. And we're going to talk about a really timely matter this spring because a lot of little baby animals get separated from their parents or their moms out of the goodness of people's hearts, but it's the wrong thing to do. And you just showed me a fabulous clip of a raccoon mom, which everyone will be able to see when this thing airs. But a lot of times we find little animals in our yards and we think they're abandoned, and we pick them up, and it's the wrong thing to do. So you're going to start, you were talking about fox kits, and we just saw a really good clip of a raccoon. So tell me, if somebody finds a cluster of baby animals, say they're raccoons, in their yard somewhere in the bowl of a tree or whatever, mom will eventually come back unless she's been hit. Most of the time mom will come back, right?
Well, it really depends on the species. For example, if you find a nest of baby rabbits or a fawn baby, the mother intentionally leaves them because she has an odor, but they don't, so they rely on camouflage. So if you find them alone, that's perfectly normal, and mom should be coming back, so just leave them alone. On the flip side, if you find a baby raccoon wandering around, that's very unusual because mother raccoons are really good mothers. They don't let their babies wander. And sometimes skunk babies you might find, but what may happen because they're very nearsighted, they are following their mom nose to tail, and she goes one way and they go another. So a lot depends on the species, but we tell people don't do anything until you consult with a wildlife rehabilitator and make sure you're not kidnapping an animal.
Right. And in the case of skunk, I mean, they're cute as heck, but I don't think they probably still are temperamental when you try to pick them up. How many people try to save skunk versus?
A lot do.
A lot do.
A lot do.
Yeah. God bless them, because go on your way. God bless. God with you. I'm not going to pick you up. And I'm sure most people are like me. I mean, I'm as dumb can be about a lot of the wildlife issues. I lived in Windsor, and one day I heard tussling, like a squeaking. It was night in the backyard, and we had a lot of squeaking. And I went out to the yard, and there were two baby skunk wrestling, and then I thought, oh, they're fighting, and never thinking mom's nearby. Probably, I just watched them have a great old time, and then all of a sudden, out from under my porch comes a big mom. And she turned and looked at me, and she stamped. And I'm such a city girl, I went, she's chastising them for fighting. I had no idea. And then she went, hey, it's me, goodbye. But she just said, she was very near, but she let them do her thing. So, but I probably would be one of those people that I would not be picking up a skunk. So if you see a fawn, you're saying fawn and raccoon are very good mothers. So if you would see a doe nearby in season, on the road because she's been hit. Do we look for a fawn?
Yes.
Do we go and look and
Yes.
And then
that would be one of the instances where you would look for the fawn and have to call a rehab or for rescue.
Okay, because you won't want them.
The rule of thumb with fawns is if you see a fawn crying and wandering all day, that's unusual. If the fawn's just lying quietly, that's a good sign. But if they're crying and wandering and it's been a number of hours, then indicates something bad happened to mom.
Something bad happened to mom. You mentioned rabbits, that rabbit moms do come back. And here's another thing. Mowing your yard. I mean, you had to, I know somebody had a horrible incident and still tortures them to this day. But do a lot of mom rabbits tend to bury their babies like in a thing in the grass?
Shallow nests.
Shallow nest,
some of them are deeper, some of them are not. Some of them are very near the surface. Sometimes she covers it with grass and dried, soil. Sometimes it's her fur that you'll see. What I would say is if you can walk the lawn before you mow it.
And people, walk the lawn before you mow it.
You can save yourself a little heartache that way.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. We had, as I mentioned to you two earlier, we had a rehabilitator of raptors here a bit ago, and she mentioned the notion that not touching baby birds, for instance, is a false notion that she was suggesting, and Mary Beth, you know her, that a basket, that they've actually used a clothes basket, which I thought was a great idea, and kind of got it up there in the trees because mom will come back. So are there animals that definitely mom will be spooked if she smells your scent? So you should be careful handling or handle with gloves or whatever.
Right. Well, with birds, it's interesting. It's an old wives' tale.
Okay.
Everybody's heard that if you touch a baby bird, the parents will abandon it.
You doomed
They
it.
want their baby back just as much as any other animal.
Okay.
So what we tell people to do is if a baby bird falls from a nest, try and get it back into the nest. If it's a very young baby bird, very downy, it can't thermoregulate. It can't maintain body heat, so it needs the warmth of its siblings.
Okay.
So try and get it back in the nest. If a whole nest comes down with all the babies, which happens a lot with robins, you can make an alternative nest. You can get a little wicker basket or an Easter basket. Take that and put it back up in the tree as close as possible
to the original,
because birds don't have much of a search impulse.
You're
so
kidding.
they'll go back to where they remember their babies being.
Funny.
So you try and get that basket right back where they were.
As close as you can.
And then watch from a distance. And if you see the adult birds flying in to feed
Then
the
you
young,
know
all
they're-
is well. And that's a good thing.
You would think they'd hear the cheep, 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 you know,
They
like
do.
baby
They
birds
do.
make a racket.
Yeah, they
you
do,
know.
and that's what helps to bring them in. But still, if you move the nest far
I see,
away,
I see.
they won't always
Okay.
follow it. The other thing we have an issue with is in the middle of summer, people will call about birds with broken wings that are hopping around, they can't fly. Those are usually fledglings, which are birds that have left the nest at about 3 weeks old, and they're not ready to fly, or they've been bumped out by a sibling. So they're going to hop around, but the parents will keep feeding them. And people grab them thinking they have a broken wing. They don't. So we tell people just, why do you think the bird has a broken wing? Is one hanging differently than the other? If they're just hopping around and they have, number one, a short tail or a missing tail, or if you see a lot of fecal material around them, that means the parents are tending to them. The fecal material is because when birds are fed, they
They go,
defecate.
we had an owl here that defecated
Right.
constantly.
So if you see a
Couple
lot
months
of
ago, yeah.
feces around these birds with broken wings, they're fledglings. And they usually leave the nest before those tail feathers have grown in, which is why they look like an adult, but their tail looks like it's missing.
So even though I would be worried, I don't have outside cats anymore, but I did have a hunter cat a long time ago. Even if I saw this and I had a cat or a dog, aside from trying to keep them in, it's not worth trying to pick that fledgling up and getting them back up there just to save them from a cat or a dog.
You can try, but a lot of fledglings at 3 weeks, they leave the nest and they're meant to be on the ground learning to fly, so they're going to keep popping out
Okay.
of the basket.
Okay.
You
Okay.
kind of have to get that cat inside.
Okay.
And we get hundreds of mangled animals, particularly rabbits.
Rabbits.
Deb can tell you about that.
rabbits. And they're so cute.
Yeah, because of outdoor cats, and it's not their fault.
No,
It's their
because they're
instinct.
hunters. They're hunters. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a neighbor when I had this cat. Matter of fact, I had 2 outdoor cats. They were just raised outside, and I took them, and he called and said, "Your cats are working in tandem to trap a baby rabbit. What shall I do?" I said, "Spray cats with water.
Yeah.
They'll come home. Then I'll get them in." But I mean, I don't want that baby. I don't want that baby killed.
Well, it's also important to know that if a cat has had the baby in its mouth, that with rabbits, they need to come in for treatment.
Oh, really? Even if it's not like puncture wound? I mean, this little
you
thing
may
was
not see
crying.
the puncture wound
Yeah, I
because the
see.
bunny's skin is so tender
Yeah,
and at that age. But if there is a puncture wound, they really need to be
Okay.
medicated, and then they can be released back. But they need, otherwise, they're really not going to survive. If the cat's had it in their mouth, they need to come in.
And
Yeah,
the reason
okay.
is
That's good to
cats
know.
have very toxic bacteria in their saliva. So
Okay.
if they puncture an animal, it creates a septic infection.
I gotcha.
And we have like a 6-hour window to
Yeah.
get
Really?
animate.
Really?
So this is why we tell people the single most important thing you can do to help wildlife is keep your cat in.
That's it, because they are
Exactly.
hunters. I mean, I read,
Yeah.
and I love them, and I work with Connecticut Cat Connection, and I own cats, and they own me. But, it is their instinct, and there was a book published about how many songbirds a year.
Yeah.
You go, okay, they're
Yeah.
staying in. I don't
Right.
care how bad they
Right.
want to.
Right.
They want to go out there staying
But
in.
dogs are big offenders too.
Yeah.
Dogs, I
Yeah.
mean, with the rabbits, they'll
Yeah.
find the
They
rabbits.
chase, I guess that's
But
the
even
fun
in the
thing.
nest, and what
they
I've
hunt
done
them.
with some people is to have them take either lawn furniture, like a chaise lounge,
Yeah.
and put it over the nest during daylight hours only. Because remember, a mama rabbit's going to come back by dusk
she's- okay.
and dawn. She's
Okay.
going to be around, so you
Okay.
can't have it covered at any time and change the lay of the land for her.
Okay.
But if you do it in the middle of the afternoon and you have your dog go out and play in the yard and it's covered and they can't get under there to dig at it, then that's fine too. So this way, and the rabbits will be gone in a couple of weeks.
So just do as much as you can to separate them from predators in your household.
Even a milk crate you can put over the nest, but you have to remember to get it
out
off and
when
get
she
the
comes back.
During sunlight, because
Okay.
once the sun starts to set, the mom's coming back.
Coming back, okay.
Right.
Okay, that's good. That's all good things to know, especially that baby bird thing, because I was sure like everybody else. We talked about skunk, and we talked about opossum and squirrels. Now, we didn't talk about opossum and squirrels yet. Squirrels are particularly tending at this time of through the winter. One leaves me a nice, I think it's an acorn. I found them twice on my doorstep, and then I found them upstairs in my attic. But we talked about this, like you have a squirrel in your attic. They do damage, but this is not the time to scare away mama without checking to see if they're babies. Is there a particular place that a squirrel would hide? And I'm asking this for me. Is there a particular place, because I would have gone home with a flashlight, that a squirrel would hide her babies in the attic? More up against walls?
So usually against the wall, fairly close to her entry point, which you have to figure out. It might be an uncovered vent, but they can hide them so well in the insulation that it's really hard to find them. So what we do, we just assume that this time of year, in late winter, early spring, and again late summer, they have another litter. So they have 2 litters a year, unlike other mammals who just have 1. And so what we just say, assume they're up there, assume it's mom with young. And one really nice product that I do recommend is something called the Squirrel Evictor. And what it is, it's kind of a glorified strobe light. And it's sold on the internet, and you put it up. I have one in my attic, and it just freaks out the mom squirrel, and she tends to take her babies out. She wants a nice private,
Peaceful,
quiet place to raise her young. You change the conditions, she says, strobe light, let's go,
Sure,
I'm
she
outta
doesn't
here.
just have her boyfriend up there dancing. I mean,
Yeah, that's what I think, disco.
Exactly. We've seen almost
Wasn't that Jed?
everything. Yeah,
Isn't that
it
Jed?
might be. And she tends to leave and take them with her. And then, of course, we tell people you've got to patch the entry point. But people make the mistake of finding a hole in their soffit and saying, oh, this is how the squirrel's getting in, and they patch it and often, entrap the
babies in there,
or the mom, or both.
Yeah.
So we have to get them out
first.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's easy to tell, I'm sure, once they're gone, because my cats stand and stare at walls sometimes, and I know.
Oh,
I mean,
you
I
know.
hear it, they're hearing it, so that's
Exactly.
strobe light. I may email you to make sure I get the name, but what was it called again, people?
This is called the Squirrel Evictor.
Squirrel Evictor.
At squirrelevictor.com.
And they do a lot of damage, so you do want to get the Squirrel Evictor, because nobody wants to have to redo all their wiring.
Right. You can also use a radio playing rap music or rock. I mean, you've got to use
only rap or rock.
or talk radio.
Talk radio's good. This show might be nice, but you can't use classical. People sometimes play the music they want to hear, but we're trying to get the animals out. It has to be harassing.
I'm telling you, Rush Limbaugh. I'll put him up. Perfect. What do you think, Rush Limbaugh? They would leave.
Gets every squirrel out every time. Gets me out of the house too.
Gets everybody out of the house.
But that, and you want to combine the bad sounds with, say, bad smells.
Okay.
So you can take tennis balls and soak them in vinegar. You can also use something called NBS 30, which is a natural insecticide, natural food quality grade, but they just hate the smell, raccoons and squirrels. And you can soak tennis balls or rags in it and put it all around the attic, and that will encourage them to leave.
Get out.
And to take their
And
young.
it works.
And it
Because
works,
I had
okay.
a gentleman with raccoons in the attic, and he
that's
asked
worse
me,
than
and
squirrels.
I gave him exactly that remedy, and he did the tennis balls, and he did the blaring radio, and within 3 days, the mama was out sitting on a fence, and all her babies were lined up. They watched them come down the side, and it's all lined up on the fence, so they all moved out, and he was very
Probably said to
happy.
each other, do you believe that? Do you believe the taste of music that guy
We have to
had?
move.
Yeah, we got to leave.
Right,
You know?
right.
I know it's cheap rent. Possum. Possum are, I caught one in a have-a-heart trap by accident. I was trying to trap a feral cat who was hanging around to get it help. And boy, that long snout with their long row of teeth, he was not a happy boy. We were very careful I had mitts on to trying to take. He was so terrified that even when I did this, he wouldn't come out of the cage. I had to gently slide it. So talk about I mean, they carry the babies on their back or underneath them, don't they?
Right,
So
right.
good mothers again.
Well,
do
good
you
mothers
have
to a point.
Okay, so tell me about that. I'm not a particular fan, but they are.
Actually, they're very
living things.
misunderstood, and they're really good for your yard. They eat insects and they'll
Right.
eat ticks. So people with
yeah.
Lyme and
Yeah.
worried about Lyme, their defense with the teeth. That's because that's their defense. They're scared.
There's their only, and they have such a
So
long
they're
row of
showing
teeth.
you how scared they are.
Right.
But with the mamas, they're good mamas.
Yeah.
I mean, the babies
Yeah.
are in the pouch, and then when the babies are old enough, they crawl out onto the back of
Back
the
of-
mom. But she kind of loses track, so one might fall off.
How many babies she has? Okay, so
Yeah.
here again,
Yeah.
now babies fall off because I do have a lot of them.
And
in
then
my
she keeps
backyard.
going.
Right.
She
And
doesn't
keeps-
realize.
And then we know if we see a baby opossum or possum, I
Yeah.
think the same thing, wander in your yard or little squidge of a thing in
Right.
your yard, he's
Well,
lost.
here's
But,
the,
yeah,
the
there's-
rule of thumb is size, because again, possums are our only native marsupial. Have a pouched animal. So she may have 13 babies in that pouch.
Gosh.
So when they're 2.5 months old, they crawl out and they're only mouse size. People think they're newborn because they're small. They're 2.5 months old at that point, because when they're born as embryos when they're 13 days
tiny.
old. And they're teeny. They're like
Oh my
less than
gosh,
the
like a
size of
rubber
a dime.
eraser type thing, huh?
Teeny. They look like actually a little naked bee.
Yeah.
So they crawl up into the pouch. They stay there 2.5 months, and they climb on her back. When she's waddling around with 13 of them, and they fall off, she doesn't know it.
Yeah.
So if they're 7 inches long, not including the tail, or less, they're too young to be on their own. If they're over 7 inches long, not including the tail, then they're fine to be on
So
their own.
you're talking about something this big
Yep,
is still
body-
not able to survive on its own without mom.
Right.
If he falls off her back.
Right. So
God,
it
and
has
mom's
to be
taking all those babies on her back.
Has to be over 7 inches long without that tail.
Okay.
Body size, yeah. And so, but they're interesting animals, as Deb was saying. They've been around since the time of dinosaurs.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, they
they're
look prehistoric still.
yeah. And when they open their mouth, they show you their 50 teeth,
And they hiss.
and they drool,
Yeah.
and they do all these freaky things to scare you off.
Right.
And then if that doesn't work, they're so bad at defending themselves,
they
they
play
play dead.
dead.
Yeah. So it's pathetic. They're not harmful. People look at them, they think they're going to get bitten, they're going to
They
run
have
at them.
they have a bad
Yeah.
reputation for being temperamental. And it's probably that opening
Yeah.
the mouth and
And
hissing when they
hissing.
see it's probably
Yeah.
Bad
that.
attitude,
Yeah,
right?
they have
Yeah, it's a bad
Yeah.
attitude. Yeah.
But it's fear.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And going to the size, though, I think it's important to know, too, other animals with the rabbits, rabbits that are tiny, can fit less than the size of a tennis ball, are fine on their own. Mom's already through nursing them, they're weaned, they're fully out eating greens, and yet we get so many in that are kidnapped because people think they're tiny,
Yeah.
and
Something's
they're
wrong.
rescuing this lone rabbit.
Yeah, poor little
so
rabbit.
when you think of the possums being 7 inches without the tail, not being able to care, rabbits that are that little or tiny are able to fend for
Then
themselves.
this is very important information
Yeah.
because who knows all this except
Right.
rehabbers, you know,
Right.
and you find out the hard way. I mean, most of us, as being, what do you want to say, bystanders or laymen, would have absolutely no idea. And as a result, that keeps you in business.
Right,
But
right.
this, hopefully, at least in Windsor and environs, we will not do this anymore.
Right.
So that's one thing. So we talked about the skunk and the possum. So now, when somebody brings an animal in that is not injured, that you look at it and say, this has merely been separated from its mother by accident, by a do-gooder, where do you return? I mean, you can't return them to wherever these people picked them up. I'm sure they're coming from a pretty wide area because there's not a lot of rehabbers. I mean, there's not a ton of rehabbers out there. There's one up in Ashford, you guys down there in Greenwich area. So how do you, now I got this baby, perfectly fine, nothing wrong with this baby. What do you do with them?
We try and get them right
Right
back.
back.
Yeah,
Right back
where
to
they
mom.
came from. Because what people don't realize, and we have some video to show you, mother animals, whether birds or mammals, they want their babies back. They go crazy trying to get at them. If you have
yeah.
squirrels tearing roof shingles off a house, it's because she's been separated from her babies. People have patched a hole, and she's going nuts to get
And
them
that's
back.
a motherly
Yeah.
instinct. That
So
is
we-
the
yeah.
parent instinct.
So
yeah.
often we get phone calls, Deb and I, and And so people will tell us they have an animal in need, and we try and figure out, is it really needing help, or is it just separated and needs to be reunited with mom? And then we coach them through it, and if they bring us the animal, we turn them around and make them take it right back.
Good. Because I was wondering, I mean, there are going to be a whole lot of lost squirrels and rabbits down in Greenwich, you know, from other places, because people do it.
And these mothers, I have one video where the squirrel mother was around for 5 days trying to get her babies back. And finally, they were put out, and she shot right down and got them. So, you know, they're really, really good moms. And that's what we're trying to emphasize to people is don't just assume or just don't take babies away from their moms. Don't trap this time of year, even with humane traps, because what you're likely to catch is a mother animal in and around your house, and then you take her away, release her somewhere.
And there she is. She can't get back to her babies, and they die anyway, just what you were trying to do.
Or baby squirrels and raccoons fall out of trees 3 days later because they're so hungry.
Well, we had an incident, somebody I know, and I was quite upset. They wanted to get the mother out of the attic. Well, they trapped the babies. There were 3 babies, and they left it. It's hard to even talk about it. And I have a heart trap, and they about died one by one. They died. She went out and checked the cage every once in a while. We'll release them. What are you checking the cage? I mean, and it was somebody else that had quite a huge, almost a border war with them over this. They couldn't go on the property to help those little baby raccoons. So some people don't have the common sense they were born with either. Some people just make natural mistakes. Some people just don't, you know, have that common sense.
Exactly.
So now I mean, you can't put anything in a cage for That's another thing that bothered me for 100 years. So, and you must find yourself, because I do with the cats, hard to let go at night, hard to let go when you go home, hard to stop thinking about things. And rehabbers or shelter management people, it's tough. It's tough to keep doing the job you're doing sometime. So now you have an animal that has been brought into you, not because it's been separated from mom by accident, but truly injured. You have facilities that take care of this animal. You know, how do you get them coming in? I mean, I know you don't want a flood of things dropped off at your door, right? Like here you have 50 baby squirrels. But how do you handle that? You have vets on staff. You have vets nearby you can take them to.
Well, we try to educate and through the CWRA program. So there are various wildlife rehabilitators who work from their home.
Like a foster mom or dad that comes in
and there are some that work through a facility, could be a nature center. But the primary is the training. And with the training, you know, we learn about the care, we learn about caging, we learn about the steps in caging, because a lot of times if you have an animal, it needs to go to a pre-release cage. We learn about all that goes into it, the illnesses. Every wildlife rehabilitator takes an exam, and it's given annually. And then they also partner with a veterinarian so that we can always go to someone for advice and for treatment. Because that's a big thing if you get something in that's really seriously injured.
And who pays for this treatment? I mean, do you raise funds for it, or you have vets that are very cooperative and give a portion of their time for this?
Because it depends. I've had, my personal experience, I've had vets that I have received a reduced rate, or at times they will take wildlife and work with it, work with and treat for me on my behalf. Now you've got these, you know, I know about fostering cats and dogs, but now you've got this wildlife, you're basically fostering it until it gets better. How much handling as a rehabber can you do? Do they ever form bonds, or are they just stay wild and you just want to get the heck out of your house or your facility or wherever? Do they stay kind of wild?
This is one of the big issues with wildlife rehabilitation. Essentially, you're raising animals by humans. These are wild animals, and you have to raise them in a way that maintains their wild instinct.
The distance between you and them. You're not going to stay here forever.
When they're little, you do have to handle them somewhat, but then you have to wean yourself and make sure they get into pre-release pens that are set up as natural habitats to try and give them the stimulus in the world they're going to be introduced to. So there's a lot that goes into it, and we're trained, for example, with fawns. You mentioned, you know, do they form bonds? Some animals, like fawns, will habituate to people.
I've seen those videos.
And think they're a person. And birds in particular, if they see, whatever they see when they're very young, they think,
that's mom.
That's mom, that's like my identity. And it's called imprinting. And if they imprint on a person instead of a bird, that's not reversible. So
Okay.
rehabilitators sometimes will feed baby birds with puppets that look like the parent species.
Okay.
And with mammals, we go to extremes to nurse them and then get them out in pre-release pens with others.
Not
as
a lot of
quickly
petting
as
or anything
possible.
like this. It's not a
Petting
pet.
is
It's not a
discouraged,
pet.
and you have to go.
Well, yeah, with the rabbits, rabbits reproduce regularly, so all through the season they can have 5 litters in a
Poor
season.
things.
So they come and go on a regular basis. But once their eyes open, I try to wean them to dish feeding. Once they're on the dish feeding, if I don't have to medicate anyone, I don't touch them.
Okay.
So I even clean their cage in sections so that they don't stress and they always have half a cage. And this way they become so wild they don't want to see me. They run into their hideaways as soon as I walk in the room, which is a good thing.
Good thing.
Because that's
it's
what
a
I
good
want.
thing. And I think a lot of people would feel the opposite. They're not rehabilitators, but like, but the last thing you want to do is. My daughter had mourning doves, and the mourning dove was crippled. I don't know, she was just, something was wrong. So my daughter was taking care of a mourning dove, and she had the male with it. It kept laying eggs, and all the babies were crippled. So I said, we got to separate these animals. But the male escaped. But he was in such desperate straits to get back into the cage with the female that a neighbor was pinning up laundry, and she had a bird land on her shoulder, a mourning dove, because they mate for life. And so she called my daughter and said, it has to be one of yours. Down in Philadelphia, it has to be one of yours. But he wanted to come back home, and he would not be released because she could not be released because she was crippled in one leg. She could not be released. But she's looking at it, it has to be Chris's bird because here it is. But that's what I say, they're just another nation. People don't give them credit. They're not animals. They're another nation. We deserve to respect them as that.
And some of them create the same kind of bonds. And they're lifelong.
Yeah, and you can't deny that. Right. So now you've got these sick baby animals or sick animals. You take not only baby animals, right? It's even injured
and orphan comprise the bulk of what we get. Okay. We get some injured and sick, some sick. But there are certain types of diseases we have to watch out for. For example, like with rabies, we have to determine is this
because they haven't been
potentially rabies.
Vaccinated.
But we have a whole program set up towards caring for raccoons, skunk, foxes, and bats. So
who would have more of a tendency to
they're
have
still very low incidence, but you can't rule it out in some circumstances. So we're trained in what to look for. But with sick animals, we will take in some sick animals, but the orphans are really
you're
the biggest part of it.
Okay, that's your heart. So it's not like you have to really spend a lot of time rehabbing an adult animal or a bigger animal, because God, where would you put them? Where would you put them?
Yeah.
And so it's the bulk of your time is babies. How did you start your organization? How long's the organization been around? There's always a need, so I can't even say how did you see a need. You see the need,
Well, Connecticut Wildlife Rehabilitators Association is about, I think, 35 years old, which is
1980 something was the first website.
Right. It was so far back I can't even give you a year, but it was formed at the time because wildlife rehabilitation was kind of something that a lot of people were doing, and we felt we needed to formalize and get training for people who wanted to do it, and work with our state agency, the Department of Environmental Protection, and really become a solid program. So it was formed.
Is it part? Can I stop you there? Is it part of the EPA?
The Department of Environmental Protection. No, it's a not-for-profit. It's really a network of volunteers. And you had asked about sort of staff and funding type thing. It really is in Connecticut. Most of the rehabilitators, like 98%, are volunteers, and a huge proportion of them are home-based.
And out of pocket then?
Out of pocket. Completely out of pocket. So when somebody brings us an animal that's not an orphan, they'll bring some baby raccoons, say, we're looking at maybe $800 in costs that we're going to pay.
That's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with these baby raccoons except
somebody remove mom.
And so we want to see these babies, if there's any chance mom's around. Mom does the best job. get them back to her. We're here for the ones that have lost the mother,
are true
or
orphans,
are really
or
in distress, and you know,
Or to
and-
coach people on how to reunite with mom.
right.
We can help with that too.
Do you do, some organizations will go school to school, like I said, again, the Raptor program goes school to school. Do you do that during the school year? Because sometimes when you teach kids, they're the ones that take it home and they tell their moms and dads all about it. They
So
teach their
true.
parents.
So true.
Because children are so in it, they still have that bond to animals.
Yes.
They
Yes.
just
Yeah.
so love animals.
Yes.
And so do you do any kind of programming like that for schools in your area or anything like that?
We're starting to do more. Deb's done some, and I've done some. Where we need to get a formal program going, and that's in the works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's a really good way to
Yeah.
get the lessons out there.
Absolutely.
You sent me before this a beautiful website from, I think it was the Humane Society, about orphaned animals. So we've gone over baby foxes and orphaned fawns and rabbits alone in the nest. I'm trying to think, is there any opossums or raccoons, baby skunks falling from the tree, and baby
Well,
birds who
with the
can't
baby
fly?
foxes, though, I think it's important to know that this is the time of year when they have their pups, and it's a 2-parent operation. And when the pups are little, they'll leave them at home, and the mom and dad will go out and hunt because they're hungry and they have to feed them. And oftentimes people see the pups alone, and they think, again, they're unsupervised and they
Okay.
need help, and they don't.
Now, you're calling them pups, the kits or pups. So if you see 2 or 3, I don't know how big the litters are that the fox have, but if you see 2 or 3 cuddled up together during the daylight, you're saying, leave them, because mom and dad are just off. And it's not a scent issue like with a rabbit mom, it's just they're hunting because they're hungry.
Right.
Rabbit moms can eat anywhere, I guess there's grass. Are there any unique stories you'd like to share?
Well, I will tell you, yes, they're usually you'll see the fox kits and they're playing like little puppies, you know, and they're energetic,
Yeah,
and
they're
that's
so
good.
cute. And that's, I think, why people pick it up. They're so
and
cute.
we tell people, you know, enjoy them now, because as soon as the parents decide they're old enough to go hunting with them, they'll disappear. It's just, while they're young, the parents leave them behind,
Watch
and
the
they
antics.
go off. Yeah, and sometimes I had this one guy who called me about a fox kit fan. He was like, "This is terrible." He was scared. He wanted them out, and I told him all about how really it's a good situation, a safe situation, how he should enjoy them. And I told him all about how wonderful foxes were and what to look for. And this is nature TV at its finest.
yeah.
And he had just been afraid that the foxes were going to drag off his 10-year-old children. And when I explained, they're looking for small prey, you know, rabbits and squirrels
sorry.
and mice, you know, and that this wasn't a human safety issue. They were way
Right,
back in
right,
the yard.
right.
So he was like, okay. And then he got excited about them, and he got more and more excited. And then he'd call me regularly to tell me how well they were doing.
Give you a
and then one day I said, so how are they doing? And he goes, yeah, they like the bread. And I said, what bread? And he said, well, he goes, I've been feeding them cranberry nut bread. And I said, why? And he said, because they were making a mess of the place. And I said, what do you mean a mess? He said, they were leaving all these dead animals around the shed. And he said, so I cleaned them all up and left them some bread. And I said, sir,
Just took away their hunting
that was
instinct.
their food.
That- oh
Mom
my
and Dad were
God.
bringing them carcasses
Right,
to
for them
eat.
to-
That
yeah.
was their dinner, their protein. And you've been feeding them bread. I said, for how long? He was like, I've been doing this all week. And I was like, no.
Oh, so how do we reverse that damage?
Well, I said to him, I said,
I'd
you
rather
know-
have a piece of chicken than
Yeah.
a piece of bread. I mean, I hate to tell you
Yeah.
girls, but I'm a meat eater.
Well, he just didn't realize.
Right.
He thought that Mom and Dad, I guess, were, I don't know, leaving trash around. He just didn't think. And he didn't realize that was the food the kits needed to survive on.
So when he stopped giving them bread?
So he stopped totally, and he felt horrible, and you know, he wanted to reverse the malnutrition he'd probably caused. But it was
The rickets.
but it was just the funniest story, because you know, it shows people have good intentions, but they don't.
You got
know
him halfway
much.
there during the
Got
first
him
conversation,
halfway
never
there.
thinking
Yeah.
he was going to make banana nut bread or cranberry nut bread and give it to these meat
Right.
eaters.
Right.
I don't know why he thought cranberry nut was
Probably because
appropriate.
he liked it.
Probably.
Right.
Exactly.
This is delicious.
Exactly. So that was, but we have people often doing things like that, and you know, even removing, they'll say there's a sick bird. Well, how do you know it's sick? It's on a nest. It's not moving. Well, it's incubating eggs. You know, it hasn't moved for 10 days. So they take the bird, a way to try and help the bird that doesn't need
Thinking
help.
maybe the male
Yeah.
bird would be flying around and giving her a worm now and then. Well, she's
Yeah.
thinking, don't birds do that? They
think,
work in
yep.
tandem.
Yep.
They come and feed the other
Yeah.
parent or sit on the eggs where the other parent goes.
They do, but not everybody is observant. Yeah.
Right.
And it makes it much easier now with cell phones too.
Yes.
Because
Okay,
we
you
had
take a picture of it and send it to you.
We had an instance a while ago where somebody had squirrels, and they put them out during the day to reunite, which would be normal.
Right.
And they did everything correctly, but the mom never came, and we couldn't figure it out. And finally, somebody drove out there and looked at the animal, and it was flying squirrels. So flying squirrels are nocturnal.
Right.
So you'd have to put them out at
At
night
night.
for
Right.
mama to find.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, they had the way I saw only one time that I ever see in a barn a flying squirrel poke, and it was red. It poked its little head over.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to get really close up to see webbing. You really don't see that. You know,
Unless
do
they
it by-
fly from a
Unless they
tree.
glide,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And then you see the gliding.
Right.
So that's hilarious. I mean, did you expect that when you went out, or did you like, what is gonna?
No, no. It was
flying
just
squirrel.
now I understand why
Yeah.
mom wasn't returning.
Right.
And mom was probably going crazy during that
Yeah.
whole
She
period of
probably was.
time. I mean,
Yeah, because her babies were being pulled in at night when she was
she's trying to
coming
get them.
Trying to look for them.
Yeah.
Like,
So we
yeah,
have
good.
a couple of other things too, that feeding waterfowl bread is a no-no.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked about that now, and everybody does it. Now I'm guilty. I mean, I was on vacation a couple of years ago, and they were actually banging on my glass in the morning before I opened the curtains. It was swan and geese because they wanted bread.
It's not good
Yeah.
for them, and
Yeah.
it can cause a condition, and it's angel wing.
Angel wing.
And what
And
does that?
And it basically, one of their wings is at a right angle, and usually it's not something that can be corrected. If it's a real young bird and it's caught in time, and that means catching it in time, it's in the wild, and bringing it in, sometimes it can be corrected, but most often not. And that means they can't fly, they can't escape from predators, they can't migrate or
So
find
why does
food.
this happen with bread? Is it just no nutrition? Most people feed them white bread
No
too.
nutrition.
White bread, it has no nutrition,
nutrition
and it
for
creates
people either.
these malformed wings. And you see this condition, angel wing, in birds that are at parks where people
Yes,
come.
I have, now
And
that you said
we,
that.
we did a little study in the Midwest, and we were at a park, and people were coming up every 20 minutes with loaves of bread with the kids to feed the birds bread. And some people we went up and said, do you realize, you really can't feed them bread here? It does all these terrible things to them, but could you feed them, poultry starter food instead that you can get at Agway? Because that wouldn't harm them. We'd rather you not feed them at all.
At all,
it's
because they
creating
should be
this
able to- yeah,
dependency
dependency,
on people and, and not unnatural foraging. But you can tell these people were not willing to give up this habit. It
Because
was an
it's their
outing.
yeah.
It's a family outing. It's
They don't
something they
realize,
do. And again, we always say most wildlife or animal problems are really people problems.
Right,
It's
because they're
our-
born knowing what to do.
Yeah, our behavior
Yeah.
causes the supposed problematic
Right.
animal behavior. And that's a terrible problem we deal with ducks and geese just being fed all the wrong things and
We'll
just
never
coming to
do it
people
again. I know
for
that
food.
they would bang on that door, tap, tap, tap.
Yeah.
And then I remember getting up that morning and my sister-in-law saying, "Where's the bread for toast?" She was unhappy with me. It's like, they got it. You didn't even save one piece, but now I know. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I have, squirrels, they're so active. I fed them peanuts and things like that, but I haven't for a long time.
Yeah.
I've got inside animals I got to feed. So is there a way for people to get in touch with you? Would you suggest, because you are busy and you probably spread really thin, sending cell phone images in to an email so you can evaluate the situation, or emailing you to evaluate the situation rather than driving and just dumping a load of newborn babies whose mothers are looking
Right.
for them at your doors?
Right.
So how do you do that?
We have a website that Deb created, CWRAwildlife.org, and that C as in cat, WRAwildlife.org. And it gives you advice on what to do. If you encounter an animal, it gives you some helpful advice so you can determine whether or not it's an orphan or if it needs help. And then we have a phone number. People can call us. And when they call us to talk to us about the situation, we'll ask them a lot of questions, and we will ask them to send photos, because we even have to confirm the animal is what they think it is. Because sometimes people have a baby animal and they tell us it's something like a baby squirrel, and it turns out to be a flying squirrel. So the advice is different for the different animals. So we'll need to confirm things and make sure, and we'll ask some questions about the circumstance to see if the animal can be reunited with the mother if it's an orphan.
And one of the things too that's really, really important, and I know I received many calls this season where there's Good Samaritans and they want to do the right thing and they rescue an animal and they try all sorts of things, feeding it different things and all kinds of things that they think are right for the animal. And it's almost never right for the animal. Most of what you're going to find on the internet is either incomplete or incorrect. If you go to one of the sites, like you were citing the Humane Society website or the CWRA wildlife.org website, you're going to get accurate information.
Right.
And what we ask is that if you do have to rescue an animal from some danger and bring it in, the babies need to be kept warm, quiet, and dark.
Okay.
So what that means is that you need a box or a container that's appropriate. So you wouldn't put baby birds or a baby rabbit or something into a wire cage because they would be injured, or baby birds or birds in general can injure their wings. You would, most of the time we put them in a cardboard box. You need to make sure it's perforated so there's air flow. Make sure it's got a cover. Rabbits can jump really high. And you put in like a t-shirt or a fleece, something cozy.
Warm and
and so that they
Cuddly.
can cuddle, not put it down on the bottom so they sit on top. Embrace them in it. And then also you need a heat source. And what we tell people is there's many household things that you can use. A lot of people ski. You have the hand warmers. Or if you have uncooked rice, you can throw it in the microwave. What we ask is that you don't put that against the baby's skin, and you don't allow for it to be against the baby's skin.
So where would you put it, like on
I
the
would
side
put it in
of
a
the box?
sock. Put it in a
Okay.
sock and put it next to the baby, because then even if they brush up against it,
It's not gonna hurt them.
And you
It
always
won't
give
boil them, yeah.
right, and you always give them a little space so they can move a little bit off the heat, so they don't have to be up against it. But they don't thermoregulate, so they need help with the
All
heat.
babies? All baby animals, or just the rabbits and
Baby mammals,
baby
yes.
mammals don't
They're
thermoregulate?
very young ones, before their fur grows in.
yeah, they're little naked.
And baby birds, when they're downy or when they're partially feathered, you see a lot
They
of
have
skin.
no fat on them anyway,
They
you
can't
know?
maintain
Yeah.
body heat. So when that's particularly weather like this, where there are babies down now, it's freezing cold.
I know. This is
They
done-
need a heat source that isn't too hot that it burns them, but warm, keeps them warm.
Right. And even if it's something that's traumatized and injured, sometimes we get the little rabbits that are hit by a car, and they might be a little bigger, but they also need the warmth element. They don't necessarily want it, but they might need it. Just like a human that was traumatized.
And this is if they pick them up before they can get to a rehabber.
Right.
These are good things to do to
Exactly.
help save the baby until you can get them to or talk to a rehabber or get them to a
Right.
rehabber. And does your website list a series of rehab people? I mean, you're quite
Yes.
far away, and I thank
We
you
have
again
a
for
directory
coming.
of
A directory
a
of all
network,
kinds of network.
and people can look up their town and see who
Okay.
they can find. And one of the things you'll see at the top of our website is we do a lot of pitching for scrap the trap, don't trap. And we're just telling people everywhere, please, but if you have a nuisance wildlife situation, contact us before you get out a trap or hire a trapper, because you're going to take mom away from her young.
Babies, yeah.
All these animals in and around houses are mothers. That's why they're there.
They feel safe
Yeah,
and
and these
protected.
have-a-heart traps, people think they're kind and, they capture the animal live, but the animal freaks out in them and does a lot of damage trying to get out. Plus, if you take an animal away and put him someplace new that looks good to you, all they're doing, it's like if I dumped you in the middle of nowhere
Right,
with no
right.
money,
So
no
find
food.
your way- find your way
they're
back
desperate
home.
and they want to get home, and
Yeah.
they usually end up getting hit by cars or
Okay.
run out by resident animals. So,
So that's the
yeah,
other thing is
contact
keep
us.
them as close as you can to their home base.
Exactly.
Even if he's been hit and he's on the street, you're going to call you and you're going to try to return him, I guess, as close as you can after you rehab them.
Right.
But so I guess the ABCs would be make sure first it is an orphaned animal
Right.
by looking for all the signs day or
Right.
night. And again, you can go to their website.
Exactly.
The second thing is if it is an injured animal, then or if it isn't injured, you get it as close back to its place as you can, or just don't touch it. If it is an injured animal, you keep it warm, you keep it quiet, you keep it dark, you give it air until you can get to a rehabber.
Right.
And you do not feed them people
Do
food.
not feed them.
Don't feed
Don't
people.
feed them anything. until you
Yeah,
talk to
Don't feed a
anyone.
sick
Don't-
animal anything because you don't. Okay.
You don't want to feed them anything. Yeah, just let the rehabilitator who knows what they're doing
Okay.
figure out the right food. Also, often they're dehydrated, badly dehydrated if they're an orphan.
Will they drink water? Do most of them drink water? Or
They
you
need a
drop them?
rehydrating solution,
Oh, okay.
and you, with say baby birds, you have to do it properly so you don't get it in the lungs.
Okay.
Baby mammals
thing
as
with the
well.
baby rabbits.
Yeah, so that's why we prefer people don't try to feed them.
Right,
Their
right.
first instinct is feed
Sure,
this
it
animal.
has
We
to
just
have
say
water,
keep
yeah.
them warm, keep them quiet,
Right.
call for advice. And whatever you do, don't trap. If you have a nuisance wildlife problem, call us for advice on how to humanely handle that.
And babies, like baby mammals, when you're feeding them and they're dehydrated, they can't digest the food you're feeding them.
Okay. Because you need
So
that
you're
water
doing
to
more harm than good.
Right.
Okay. And during this show, you will find a couple of series of hilarious, hilarious videos. And we want to do a disclaimer. One of them has a raccoon taking her children out of one place and looking like she's heading to the neighbors. That is
Right.
not the case.
Right,
She's
right.
not coming to your house with her babies,
right.
but it's a hilarious image because it looks like she's like on to the next house.
Right, right.
And that is not. So there will be a lot of video that they bought that's very telling, that's very helpful, and one unintentionally funny.
Right,
So
right,
that's
right.
good. So if you ladies would like to give your website again or any contact information you wish to share without being inundated,
Right.
please do so now. You can look at the.
Great. It's CWRA wildlife.org, and the phone number is 203-393-1050 for assistance.
Okay, I appreciate again you coming this way, and I learned things, and I thought I knew a lot of things about animals because I've taken care of them and all, but wildlife's quite different than domestic. And I think when we try to take care of the wildlife, we're treating them like domestic animals,
Yes.
and that's where people go wrong.
Right.
And
Yes,
that's probably
exactly.
all good intentions, but
Right.
leave them where you found them, people.
Right.
Leave them where you found them.
Right.
And I appreciate you coming and showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Oh, your hands are
My
freezing.
hands are always, it's a cold day.
Really, it's a cold day.
Summer
It's
has
gonna be-
not, or spring hasn't arrived yet.
June.
Yeah.
June. Try for June.
I
So,
will.
but I appreciate you ladies coming.
Thank you.
And this wraps up the show for today. I hope you enjoy the videos. They did bring quite a few, and the one of the raccoon you'll really appreciate. I hope it's funny as heck. So thank you for watching.